Dublin, 1838. A city shrouded in fog, faith and fear. Among its cobblestone streets emerged a case so strange, so unsettling, that both science and the church tried to erase it from history. This is the story of the Callahan twins, a story buried in silence, yet still whispering from the shadows. You're watching Forgotten Chronicles, where history's most hidden and haunting cases are brought back to light. If you want more stories the world tried to forget, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, so their voices are never silenced again. Bum. Dublin, in the year 1838, was a city poised uneasily between two worlds. Its narrow streets, lined with stone buildings and lit by the dim glow of gas lamps, carried the atmosphere of a place both ancient and restless. The old city, steeped in tradition, superstition, and the authority of the church, stood in constant tension with the growing force of modern science. In this fragile balance, whispers of the supernatural thrived. The people of Dublin did not live free of folklore. Generations had passed down stories of omens, curses, and strange events beyond explanation. In taverns and parish halls, such tales were not dismissed as idle fantasy, but as warnings to be heeded. Priests spoke with authority, their words shaping public belief as firmly as law or crown. A strange occurrence, when witnessed, was often judged less by its cause and more by how it fit within the patterns of faith. Yet the city was also changing. Institutions of medicine and learning sought to impose a new order of rational thought. Dublin's physicians, bolstered by hospitals such as the Meath and Dr. Stevens, pressed for science to replace superstition, for observation to challenge tradition. Their reports carried the tone of certainty, yet often left unexplained the very phenomena they studied. The public, caught between the authority of the priest and the ambition of the physician, lived within a climate of doubt and suspicion. The year 1838 was not remarkable for its politics or its wars, but for its peculiar silences. Records show a city divided not by armies, but by interpretations of the unknown. Folklore and science clashed daily, yet neither prevailed. Beneath the ordinary rhythm of markets, sermons, and medical lectures, Dublin carried an unspoken weight, that its past could never be fully buried, and its future could never be entirely controlled. It was in this city, half lit by tradition and half shadowed by progress, that a story would emerge, a story that neither the priest nor the physician could wholly explain. For what happens when medicine encounters something it cannot explain? In the year 1838, in a modest Dublin household, the Callahan family welcomed the birth of twin daughters. Their arrival, recorded in parish registers with the same formality as any baptism or burial, carried a weight of meaning beyond ordinary circumstance. In 19th century Ireland, the birth of twins was not a neutral event. Folklore and faith gave it shape, often casting such births as omens of fortune or calamity. Accounts from the period reveal the unease surrounding multiple births. Rural tradition had long linked twins with unsettled forces, and in urban Dublin, such beliefs retained their strength. Some considered it a blessing, evidence of divine favour. Others, guided by whispers in churchyards and the words of clerics, regarded it with suspicion. To bear two children at once was to draw attention, not only from neighbours, but from the unseen. The Callahan household itself was unremarkable. Modest means, ordinary station, and no recorded history of distinction. Yet the circumstances of the twins' birth left a mark. The day was noted for sudden shifts in weather, a storm rolling quickly across the city, leaving rain upon the rooftops before vanishing into stillness. Such occurrences were not unusual in Dublin, but when paired with the birth of twins, they were easily folded into the narrative of omen. Rumours spread with the ease of smoke. Some described the daughters as a blessing, the start of a new line touched by providence. Others whispered of curses, unnatural doubling, and the possibility of misfortune carried in their presence. These conflicting voices did not fade, but grew, attaching themselves to the family before the children could speak or walk. Early signs soon emerged that the Callahan twins were not ordinary in the eyes of their community. Their movements, their illnesses, even their silences seemed bound together. Neighbours watched with quiet suspicion, noting details that might otherwise have passed without comment. To the family they were daughters. To the city they were something more, a subject of speculation, a living puzzle framed in superstition. The unease that began at their birth would only deepen as their childhood unfolded. In the early years of the Callahan twins' childhood, testimony began to circulate that their behaviour departed from what was expected of ordinary children. Parish accounts, along with recollections preserved in neighbourhood records, describe instances that drew attention not for their frequency, but for their strangeness. The children were often observed speaking as one. A sentence begun by one daughter would be finished without pause by the other, their voices aligned as though rehearsed. Neighbours noted that this habit persisted even in moments of correction or reprimand, suggesting not mimicry, but a shared impulse. Such behaviour was not unknown among siblings, yet the precision with which it occurred became a subject of private comment. Illness, too, seemed to bind them. When one grew pale with fever, the other soon followed. Parish notes record at least 2 such occasions when both daughters were confined to bed within hours of each other, their conditions rising and falling in near unison. Physicians of the time offered no explanation beyond frailty, but among households nearby, the matter was interpreted with unease. Accounts also mention visions. Family testimony, repeated in tavern talk, suggested that the girls described sights they could not have shared. On one occasion, a relative reported that both spoke of a fire in the night, though no such fire had touched the Callahan home. On another, they described a man standing in the street outside, though neighbours later insisted no one had been present. Such details, whether accurate or exaggerated in retelling, deepened the impression that the twins possessed a bond beyond ordinary understanding. In Dublin society of the 19th century, rumour carried force equal to fact. Whispers in markets and churchyards could shape reputations, and the Callahans were no exception. The twins became the subject of quiet warnings and cautious observations, their family regarded with a mixture of pity and suspicion. To some, these events were dismissed as coincidence. To others, they marked the presence of something that could not be named within the language of medicine or faith. Were these simply the peculiarities of twinship, or evidence of something darker, concealed within the mirrored lives of the Callahan children? By the early 1840s, the Callahan twins had attracted the attention of physicians and academics in Dublin. The city, already home to institutions such as the Royal College of Surgeons and the city's principal hospitals, served as a hub for medical inquiry in Ireland. At a time when anatomy schools multiplied and dissection theatres filled with eager students, anomalies of birth and body were regarded not as private matters, but as opportunities for study. The twins, whose peculiar bond had already stirred comment among their neighbours, were soon regarded less as children than as specimens. Parish testimony indicates that physicians visited the Callahan household under the pretence of offering care, though their true intent lay in observation. Notes preserved in incomplete ledgers describe examinations conducted in the manner of case studies, measurements of pulse, dilation of the pupils, and comparative responses to simple tests. In these records, the twins are referred to not by name, but as subjects, their individuality erased for the sake of clinical clarity. Medical practice of the period was marked by curiosity unhindered by modern safeguards. Consent, as it would later be defined, did not exist. Families of limited means were often pressured into compliance, while children, especially those born under unusual circumstances, were subjected to scrutiny without recourse. In this climate, the Callahan twins became an object of fascination, 2 lives moving in concert, a challenge to established categories of mind and body. The examinations produced results that confounded as often as they informed. Reflexes tested in one child appeared mirrored in the other. Illnesses observed in one were soon duplicated by her sister. Physicians recorded these findings in restrained language, noting simultaneous responses beyond ordinary expectation, but offered no conclusions, and the clinical phrasing, however, lay discomfort. For every observation made, the twins revealed a pattern that resisted explanation. In lecture halls, the case was mentioned cautiously, framed as an illustration of the mysteries that nature occasionally presented. Yet in private notes, certain physicians admitted that the matter unsettled them. The further they studied, the less they understood. The Callahan twins, intended as subjects of science, instead confronted science with its own limits. Records from Dublin in the 1840s suggest that the Callahan twins shared a connection that unsettled even those accustomed to unusual cases. Accounts preserved in parish notes and scattered medical reports describe reactions so closely mirrored that they appeared less coincidence than compulsion. On more than one occasion, it was observed that when one child sustained injury, the other exhibited signs of distress without having been touched. A minor cut recorded during a household mishap produced not only tears in the injured girl, but a gasp from her sister, who clutched the same hand though her skin was unbroken. In another instance, witnesses reported that both children fainted simultaneously during a crowded gathering, their collapse so perfectly aligned that no one present could later say which fell first. These episodes were not confined to private memory. Dublin's newspapers, eager for material that blurred the line between curiosity and spectacle, carried short notices hinting at the twins' peculiar bond. One broadsheet printed in 1842 mentioned sisters whose pulses quicken in concert, while another alluded to an unnatural sympathy of nerves. Though phrased cautiously, such reports reached wide audiences, and the case soon entered public discussion. Among physicians, the matter was approached with restraint. Some framed the observations as exaggerations born of superstition. Others conceded that simultaneous responses had been documented, though they avoided proposing explanations. Lacking the vocabulary of later psychology, the phenomenon was filed under sympathetic reaction, a phrase that admitted correlation while offering no cause. Outside the halls of medicine, the reports fueled speculation of a darker kind. In taverns and markets, the twins were spoken of as if joined not merely in body but in spirit. The suggestion that one might dream what the other had seen or suffer pain the other endured gave rise to a belief that their bond was less natural than spectral. To many Dubliners, the twins embodied a connection that neither faith nor science was prepared to name. What physicians attempted to rationalize, superstition claimed as proof. Each report, however restrained, added weight to the conviction that the Callahan children were not ordinary. With every mirrored gesture and every simultaneous affliction, fascination deepened, and so too did fear. By the mid-1840s, the peculiar reports surrounding the Callahan twins had reached the attention of the Catholic clergy in Dublin. At the time, the Church exercised authority not only over religious life, but also over education, morality, and social order. Few voices carried greater weight in shaping how the community understood unusual events. Parish records indicate that local priests addressed the matter from the pulpit, cautioning parishioners against what they termed unnatural sympathies between the children. Multiple births, though not unheard of, had long been viewed with unease in rural Ireland, where superstition lingered around notions of curses and divine judgment. In the Callahan case, the twins' simultaneous ailments, mirrored reactions, and rumoured visions provided material for more severe interpretation. Statements circulated that the children's bond might be evidence of possession or influence of a darker origin. Parishioners were instructed to exercise vigilance, and families were quietly discouraged from allowing their children to associate too closely with the sisters. Some accounts note mothers making the sign of the cross when the twins passed in the street, a gesture less of blessing than of warding. The Church's intervention placed pressure on the Callahan family. Where physicians had framed the matter as a subject of study, the clergy framed it as a matter of the soul. Letters and sermons emphasized the danger of ignoring such signs, and in doing so they shifted public opinion further towards suspicion. To doubt the warnings of priests was, in practice, to doubt the authority of the Church itself. This ecclesiastical stance did not align with the more cautious approach of Dublin's medical community. Hospital records reveal ongoing examinations, with physicians reluctant to ascribe the events to supernatural causes. Yet their observations carries. Had less influence among the laity, than the authoritative voice of the parish altar. The result was a deepening divide. Science sought explanation, method, and record, while faith demanded vigilance, confession, and, in some quarters, exorcism. The Callahan twins stood at the center of this conflict, regarded simultaneously as specimens for study and as subjects of spiritual suspicion. Science wanted answers. Faith wanted exorcism. By the late 1840s, the presence of the Callahan twins had moved beyond the confines of their parish and household into the broader life of the city. Dublin, a city already restless with poverty, disease, and the shadow of political unrest, found in the twins a subject that blended fear, fascination, and folklore. Crowds gathered near the Callahan residence, hoping for a glimpse of the sisters. Accounts describe onlookers pressing against windows, lingering in alleyways, and following the children through the streets. Some whispered prayers for protection as they passed, while others demanded that the family reveal the truth of what they harbored. Urban gossip networks, sharpened by tavern talk and marketplace exchanges, transformed the girls into figures of legend. Stories circulated that they spoke with one voice, or that they foretold deaths in the community. These rumors, though unverified, spread rapidly in a city where word of mouth carried more weight than print. The few Dublin papers that mentioned the twins only fueled speculation, their reports stripped of detail, but heavy with implication. Public curiosity soon shifted toward collective unease. To many, the twins represented not merely a curiosity of nature, but a challenge to order itself. Neighbors reported strange dreams after encountering them. Mothers forbade their children from approaching, and tradesmen muttered of ill fortune whenever the sisters were near. The line between observation and accusation grew thin. Mob sentiment, once sparked, proved difficult to control. Testimonies suggest that groups of young men taunted the family in the streets, while larger gatherings debated whether the church or the medical establishment should intervene more forcefully. The matter had ceased to be private. It had become civic, almost political, framed as a threat to the moral and spiritual fabric of Dublin. Fascination hardened into hostility. What began as whispers of witchcraft escalated into a call for action, intervention, study, or removal. In the crowded tenements and candlelit parlors of the city, one refrain echoed with growing urgency. The twins could no longer be left to their own fate. Hysteria had become policy. The question was not if the twins would be acted upon, but how, and by whose hand. By the early 1850s, the case of the Callahan twins had passed fully into the hands of Dublin's physicians. No longer treated as children, they were instead catalogued as living material, subjects upon which new knowledge might be forced into existence. Records from hospitals and private chambers describe procedures that, by modern standards, would be regarded as violations. Physicians, lacking protocols of consent, administered tests designed to probe the limits of the sisters' connection. In one account, pressure was applied to the arm of one twin, while the other was closely observed for signs of reaction. Reports note shared flinches, involuntary cries, and simultaneous fainting spells. The notes are clinical, stripped of reflection, each event reduced to a datum. Other methods grew more invasive. Burning substances held to the skin of one child were recorded alongside observations of the second's agitation. Tightly bound cloths restricted breathing, while physicians documented whether distress passed between them. Pain, in these records, became an instrument of measurement. The atmosphere within these studies was one of sterile detachment. Men in black coats debated results in the margins of ledgers, their conclusions cautious yet persistent. The twins defied ordinary explanation. Yet the procedures themselves grew harsher, as if the more the children resisted comprehension, the more severe the measures became. The toll was evident. Descriptions of their physical condition note pallor, frailty, and episodes of collapse. Where once the sisters had been regarded as a local curiosity, they were now confined, weakened by the demands of observation. The case had shifted from spectacle to secrecy. Public mention diminished, replaced by guarded reports circulated among medical societies and academic correspondences. In these controlled rooms, the humanity of the twins, disappeared, olved into lines of ink. They were no longer daughters or sisters, but instruments in an experiment that could not admit failure. And yet, despite the cruelty, no clear explanation emerged. The bond remained intact, unbroken, even as the bodies that bore it began to falter. Science's curiosity had hardened into obsession. And in that obsession, the Callahan twins were being written out, not as children of Dublin, but as anomalies to be erased. By the mid-1850s, the trail of the Callahan twins disappears. The parish records that had once carefully noted baptisms, illnesses, and household entries offer no line marking their deaths. The civil archives, expanding during this period, contain no certificates. Hospital ledgers, previously meticulous in listing admissions and outcomes, fall silent. The absence is not accidental. Contemporary medical journals that once referred, if briefly, to the Dublin twin case cease all mention after 1844. Manuscripts preserved in university collections reveal abrupt gaps, pages missing where earlier references might have stood. Even the Church, so often precise in documenting sacramental rites, leaves no trace of funerals, burials, or absolutions connected to the Callahans. Theories circulate in later accounts. Some suggest that the girls succumbed to illness during the relentless experiments, their bodies interred quietly without public notice. Others argue that institutionalization removed them from view, confined to facilities where anomalies could be hidden from society. A further suspicion persists, that ecclesiastical or medical authorities intervened directly, ensuring the case would not persist as a challenge to doctrine or discipline. The silence itself became the record. Scholars searching the archives of Dublin encounter fragments, an unsigned letter noting the twins are no longer of concern, a ledger entry scratched out with ink too heavy to decipher, marginalia in medical papers that refer obliquely to the case we no longer discuss. These are traces of erasure, the residue left when deliberate removal has taken place. What remains is not knowledge, but the outline of its destruction. In a city so often defined by its chronicles, parish books, court registers, hospital logs, the lack of conclusion is its own verdict. The Callahan twins vanish from Dublin's written memory, leaving behind only rumour and conjecture. Their fate, whether by death, confinement, or suppression, is undocumented. The official record is blank. It is in that blankness, deliberate and suffocating, that the final chapter of their story resides. The Callahan twins were not concluded. They were erased. In the absence of official records, the memory of the Callahan twins endures only as residue, whispers in oral histories, fragments in private notes, and the occasional reference in Dublin folklore. Their case, stripped from the ledgers of church and medicine alike, became less a matter of fact than of shadow, surviving in the spaces where silence itself raised questions. What little remains points to a wider struggle. In 19th-century Ireland, the authority of science sought to expand, pressing into domains long held by faith and superstition. Yet, in the matter of the Callahans, both forces converged not to illuminate, but to suppress. Physicians, unable to define their bond, reduced them to subjects of trial. Clergy, unwilling to countenance an unexplained phenomenon, invoked suspicion and threat. Between the two, the children disappeared, not concluded, but effaced. Later centuries would return to the study of twins, measuring patterns of illness, perception, and behavior. Reports of shared pain or mirrored dreams, once dismissed as rural superstition, re-emerged under the language of psychology and genetics. In these studies, faint echoes of the Callahans can be heard, though their names are absent. Their story prefigured questions of ethics, consent, and the limits of human inquiry long before such debates took form. The erasure itself holds meaning. In choosing silence, the institutions of Dublin revealed as much as they concealed. To erase is to acknowledge the weight of what cannot be controlled. The twins, though gone from the registers, remain in the outline of what was deliberately removed. Their legacy is therefore not presence, but absence, a warning etched in the gaps of the archive. Were they evidence of an extraordinary human connection, centuries ahead of its recognition? Or were they simply victims of a curiosity that turned to cruelty? The record does not answer. What endures is the reminder that history often chooses what to forget. The Callahan twins became one of those choices. These are the chronicles they wanted us to forget, but we remember.
The Callahan twins vanished from Dublin's records, erased by medicine, condemned by faith, and silenced by time. Yet their absence remains louder than any written account, a warning etched into history's forgotten margins. This was Forgotten Chronicles, where we uncover the stories they wanted us to forget. If this tale unsettled you, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another shadow drawn back into the light.